Hello everyone. I'd like to present our paper titled Acculturation and Enculturation of the Majority Group Across Domains. I'm the first author of this paper, Yang Han. Currently, I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Institute of Education at Xiamen University. The corresponding author is Dr. Xiaojun Zhang from Academy of Future Education at Xi'an Jiaotong Liverpool University. My presentation contains 6 parts: introduction, literature review, research questions, method, findings, and implications. First is the introduction. Students' transition to higher education is mainly cultural. The new environment not only confronts students with a composite of diverse people who constitute and influence their sociocultural life, but also imparts an academic culture different from that in the previous educational context. With the trend of globalization and higher education internationalization, students' acculturation has become an increasingly mutual accommodation process, and most majority student group members are influenced by the minority group to a greater extent than before. The research setting of our paper is a Sino-Foreign Cooperative University, SFCU for short. Chinese students are in the demographic majority on this internationalized campus. Scholars have extensively discussed the establishment, policies, strategies, quality assurance, and employment prospects of SFCU graduates, but have rarely discussed the acculturation and enculturation experiences of Chinese students at SFCU. Therefore, our study focuses on the acculturation and enculturation of Chinese undergraduates, as well as influential factors related to their acculturation and enculturation. Next is literature review. The first section of literature review concerns enculturation and acculturation. Focusing on minority group members, Barry identified 2 underlying dimensions of acculturation: maintaining a heritage culture and/or participating in the host culture. Initially, scholars depicted acculturation as a unilinear process of change, with adherence to one's heritage culture and identity at one end of the continuum, and the establishment of relationships with the dominant cultural groups of the host country on the other. To represent biculturalism, a bilinear model of acculturation states that heritage and host cultural norms and practices may be independent, gain favor instead. This implies that approaching one culture does not necessarily lead to distancing from the other. Moreover, Kim pointed out the limitation of solely using the term acculturation to describe the interplay between people and their heritage culture. Since several studies on minority group students have justified the rationality and the feasibility of separating enculturation from acculturation, we try to distinguish between enculturation and acculturation of majority students group. In summary, 2 main research gaps emerge from literature on the acculturation and enculturation of students in the higher education field. Most were confined to the perspective of so-called big culture like national and ethnic culture. Acculturation and enculturation usually occur when individuals transition between the national cultures of their host and home countries. Other cultures, such as academic ones, also exist in the higher education field. Additionally, contextual influences of the higher education field on students' acculturation and enculturation are briefly mentioned in the literature. So we aim to fill in these two research gaps in the enculturation and acculturation literature. Enculturation stresses the socialization and the retention process of heritage or previous culture or both, while acculturation emphasizes engagement and adaptation to the dominant or new culture. In the second section of our literature review, we refer to higher education internationalization. The trend of higher education internationalization renders university and college campuses more multicultural and diverse. Since the 1990s, various types of transnational higher education have been established in Asia, including branch campuses, twinning, franchises, articulation, online and distance learning, study abroad, exchange programs, and SFCU. There are currently 10 SFCUs in China. Various factors in the field of SFCU will influence students' acculturation and enculturation. Because institutional logic and actors are important components of the field, we depart from these two constructs to excavate the influential factors on students' acculturation and enculturation experiences. Here, institutional logic is defined as the socially constructed historical patterns of cultural symbols and material practices, including assumptions, values, and beliefs by which individuals and organizations provide meaning to their daily activity, organize time and space, and reproduce their lives and experiences. It conditions actors' choices for sense making, the vocabulary they use to motivate action, and their sense of self and identity. In the field, multifold institutional logic such as academic or professional logic and market logic coexist and may regulate, cultivate, and motivate students. However, the institutional logic that structures student acculturation and enculturation is under-researched in the existing literature. We have two research questions in this paper. First, what acculturation and enculturation domains and strategies do most student groups demonstrate in the field of internationalized higher education? Second, what institutional logic and actors in the internationalized higher education field influence the acculturation and enculturation of the majority student group? Method. We select X University, one of 10 SFCUs with independent legal status in China. It represents a typical case of higher education with a high level of internationalization in terms of the number of international staff and students. English medium instruction in teaching and learning. International activities such as exchange and articulation programs, and international partnerships and projects. We adopted the qualitative case study method in this paper. In terms of research sample, we recruited 60 Chinese students and 11 staff members through purposeful and snowball sampling. We collected data through semi-structured interviews. 55 students had in-person interviews with us, while 5 had interviews via phone calls due to their personal preferences. All staff members had in-person interviews. Our interviews lasted for 30 minutes to 2 hours. We used the 6-phase process of thematic analysis to generate 26 and 28 initial codes, and subsequently 5 and 8 themes for each of the research questions, as well as 2 final themes. Next is our findings. Based on the qualitative data, we find that the majority student group in the field of SFCU mainly experience academic acculturation, social acculturation and enculturation, as well as ethnic acculturation and enculturation. Here, academic acculturation refers to the transition from the traditional academic culture involving uncritical textbook-centered norms in high school to the new academic culture of higher education that values self-regulated and self-directed learning. Engaging in a global community that advocates being global citizens with international visions denotes social acculturation, whereas socializing in conformity with social norms and traditions renders social enculturation. Ethnic acculturation and enculturation differ from social acculturation, with an emphasis on contact with people from diverse ethnic and cultural backgrounds and the development of intercultural competence. Students experience ethnic acculturation when integrated into different ethnic cultures, while ethnic enculturation by retaining their heritage culture. In each of these aspects of academic, social, ethnic acculturation and enculturation, there are different cognitive, behavioral, affective, or value domains, such as in the academic acculturation aspect. Students have meaning of learning, have self-determination in the cognitive dimension, and try to adjust, regulate, and take initiative in the behavioral dimension. In terms of the affective aspect, they change or adjust their mood toward learning. Furthermore, we found that the internationalization institutional logic influence students' academic, social, and ethnic acculturation. International staff and students have impacts on students' academic and ethnic acculturation. In addition, co-national peers exert influence on students' social enculturation, while personal preference and the pandemic affect students' ethnic enculturation. Next is implications. We generate a holistic framework to provide theoretical implications in this paper. It makes a unique theoretical contribution to the literature on majority group acculturation by considering the academic, social, and ethnic aspects of acculturation and enculturation, in elaborating on their domains of the majority group and the unique context of the SFCU, and analyzing the influences of internationalization logic and actors on acculturation and enculturation. Also, we provide practical implications for academics, higher education institutional administrators, and policymakers in facilitating students' acculturation and enculturation in a systematic and tailored manner. There are references for my presentation. Thank you for watching and listening.